Hello, this is Jackie Cohen, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Monday, July 6th issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. America's 250th celebrated with parades, fests, fireworks. Rain puts damper on some events, but spirits remain high. This past weekend, Greater Rochester communities and people celebrated America's 250th birthday in Independence Day parades, festivals, and fireworks shows stretching from Brockport to the Finger Lakes. Saturday, July 4th, brought morning rains and a mid-afternoon burst of showers that affected some local semi-quincentennial events. Brockport's was canceled because of inclement weather, for instance. Overall, though, the day brought crowds and smiles and amazement and amusement and pride in places including Fairport, Canandaigua, Irondequoit, Greece, and Rochester. In Rochester, a celebration of the ideals of Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony. On a sweltering July 3rd afternoon, dozens crammed into the small carriage house at the Susan B. Anthony Museum off Madison Street to hear Carlos Merriweather deliver Rochester abolitionist Frederick Douglass's famed 1852 Independence Day speech. The crowd included a young boy carrying a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle lunchbox, an elderly woman with a suffragette sash thrown over her shoulder, and a Shih Tzu sitting quietly in his mother's lap. Also, there was Barbara Blaisdell as Susan B. Anthony to deliver the Declaration of Rights speech, first given by the suffragette on America's centennial birthday in 1876. The speech criticized the political, social, and economic oppression of women by men. America is a constant work in progress, Taylor Phillips, a museum coordinator, said. Friday's event was held amid more celebratory gatherings to be a reminder of this country's founding ideals and historic struggles, and an examination of what is yet to come. A day of celebration in Canandaigua. Mere hours after the City of Canandaigua 4th of July parade ended Saturday, the town of Canandaigua's holiday celebration heated up. Rain threatened but held off for the most part during the early hours of the town celebration at Richard P. Outhouse Memorial Park in the town of Canandaigua. Music and lots of lawn games helped visitors pass the time before the fireworks, which were scheduled for dusk. The fireworks were moved this year from Canandaigua Lake. Food and beverage vendors were also on hand. As part of Irondequoit's events, Declaration of Independence recited via recorded video. In past years, the Declaration of Independence was recited in person at the top of the steps of Irondequoit Town Hall. This year, a new video format was shown at about 1 p.m. July 4th amid Irondequoit's Independence Day festivities. It took place not on the town hall steps, but at the gazebo, whose formal name is the Irondequoit Kiwanis Performing Arts Center. The impact of the recitation mirrored the live reception of years past, despite a decline in attendance. Some families embraced in solemn attention to the reading, filmed by lifelong Irondequoit resident Jackson Camblin. The switch in presentation style was a way to honor the 250 years with an exciting change, Irondequoit Town Supervisor John Perticone said. This nation was born through a document, a piece of paper, town historian Tim Judd said. Fairport celebrates America's 250th birthday. As marchers gathered in the village of Fairport to line up for the annual Fairport 4th of July parade, a steady rain started to fall. It wasn't the ideal situation, but was arguably more comfortable than the scorching temperatures the area had experienced over the past few days. But the raindrops let up just in time for the 10 a.m. starting time, and for the next hour or so, the gathered crowd honored veterans and first responders and took in vehicles ranging from fire trucks to school buses to shiny Corvettes. Musical entertainment included the Fairport Fire Department Marching Band and Richard Green, dressed as Uncle Sam, singing patriotic songs on the street rail revival float. Freight trains running through Main Street halted the action 4 times, but the crowd took them in stride, as pausing for passing trains are an everyday part of life in the village. Children headed home with bags of loot, candy, books, flags, sunglasses, stickers, and bookmarks that had been passed out by the various groups. The Fairport Perrinton Chamber of Commerce hosts the annual celebration in collaboration with the Village of Fairport, Town of Perrinton, and sponsors like Wegmans. Which decade was America's best? We asked 4th of July parade goers. As the nation celebrated its 250th birthday, we stopped by Irondequoit's 4th of July celebration before the heavy rain moved in and asked attendees a simple question. What was your favorite decade in America? Many picked the 1970s. Mary Patakiewicz of Gates, who was there to watch her husband, a Vietnam veteran, march in the parade, said life felt simpler then. It was a lot simpler than it is today, she said. Right now, it's difficult. The whole world is just confusing to me. Kevin Tubiolo of Irondequoit also chose the 70s, remembering it as a carefree time with fantastic music. David Baritote agreed, citing the rock music, concerts, festivals, and community spirit of the era. Current Eastridge High School students Ari Martinez and Sandy Hetrick favored the early 2000s for the music and what they described as a kinder atmosphere. Others preferred more recent years. Amber Kirchner of Irondequoit chose the 2010s because it was when she became a nurse practitioner and started her family. Several people said the present is actually their favorite time. Jeff Jackson of Irondequoit said today's technology and access to information outweigh the challenges. I think in reality, there's no better time than now, he said. Anna Santana and C.J. Brown of Henrietta agreed. I think right now is pretty good, Santana said. So far, so good, Brown added. In Henrietta, and America's 250th rally tinged with protest. Henrietta Neighbors for Democracy held an Independence Day rally at Hoskins Park to reflect on American history as the nation celebrates its 250th anniversary. James Swartz of Henrietta said that as a veteran of the Vietnam era and the invasion of the Dominican Republic, he stands for democracy and opposes what he described as the fascism of the Trump regime. I am appalled at what is happening to our country and the implementation of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2026, which is over half already instituted across our government, Swartz said. It's taking away benefits from the people and giving benefits to the filthy rich, a complete switch from the liberal FDR era of American history. Mary Terziani of Henrietta said she attended the rally because she sees it as her patriotic duty to defend the Constitution. I believe in what our forefathers have declared, and I believe that immigrants should be welcome, Terziani said. When it comes to America's 250th anniversary, Terziani said it is important to celebrate the milestone and find ways to unite. No matter what side we're on, we need to hold to the principles of our nation. Schutt's cherry farmers reflect on their mission on America's 250th. While cherries hit their peak Independence Day weekend, sweltering temperatures meant they wouldn't last long. Farmers everywhere waited and wondered how many would brave the sun for some good old American cherry picking before it was too late. Kaja Harris wasn't going to miss out. It was her family's first time, and they easily landed on a local favorite with deep Rochester roots, Schutt's Apple Mill, while better known for its apples and fried cakes, has 3 generations of cherry trees ripe for the picking. It's beautiful, Harris said July 3rd, as her children ran up and down the densely plotted orchard, carrying thatched baskets to collect the fruits of their labor. The cherries taste real sweet. It makes you definitely appreciate farm work more because, hey, I never knew it was so hot, she laughed. The unpredictable nature patterns seen this year, however, reflect the realities of modern-day farming. A small family farm like this one was once considered the American dream. It represented land ownership, self-reliance, and hard work that bore a proud legacy. Today, it is much more complicated. Evan Schutt said the farm lost half its cherry crop this year. The summer fruit typically acts as an income boost, leveling the farm's books until its prime apple season each fall. Climate change has created new uncertainty, Shute said. Family farms like this are either going to get bigger, he said, or go out of business. Irondequoit July 4th parade includes a heroic figure, Captain America. Along the Irondequoit parade route on July 4th, Captain America caught attention from kids and adults alike. A woman let a man in a cap shirt returning to his spot in the viewing gallery know he'd just missed the Star-Spangled Man. And at one point, a perhaps too excited small child said, "Look, it's Iron Man," confusing him with an Avengers teammate. Touting the shield and under the helm was not Steve Rogers from the comics, but Irondequoit cosplayer Greg Whitehair. He's participated in the parade over the past 6 years after he was asked. "I mean, July 4th, Stars and Stripes kind of goes together, so I've been doing this ever since," Whitehair said. In a Rochester cemetery, remnants of our nation's heritage and also wild berries. Rapids Cemetery in the 19th Ward was first laid out around 1810 for the settlement of Castleton, with the location of a major disembarkation point on the Genesee River. It became the final resting place for dozens of local Revolutionary War, War of 1812, and Civil War veterans, alongside early settlers who likely died of dysentery, Genesee fever, and complications from childbirth. Then the cemetery was buried too, swallowed by vegetation and neglect after private owners moved away or died in the early 1900s. In 2015, a group of veterans, city officials, and volunteers from the 19th Ward Community Association came together to uncover the hidden graves. A plot of black raspberry bushes had emerged at some point in the last century. The berries ripen yearly around Independence Day, and they have offered a new tradition in a historic corner of Rochester. On a quiet, drizzly July 4th, 2026 morning, 19th Ward Community Association members John Curran and Mary Daniel Cooper scanned the thorny bushes for clusters of dark purple fruit. "Each year we've been working to reclaim the area here," Curran said. "It had been neglected for so long." The fruit will be frozen and used for smoothies or berry toppings at the nearby St. Peter's Kitchen, which feeds Rochester's hungry 6 days a week. Old-fashioned 4th celebration canceled due to weather. The Morgan Manning House Museum in Brockport canceled its annual Old-fashioned 4th celebration because of the weather. Organizers said the decision was made with deepest apologies on behalf of Mother Nature, and noted they were especially disappointed for children who look forward to the annual parade and cakewalk. The event will not be rescheduled, and organizers said they look forward to celebrating again next year. Audit reveals New York domestic violence hotline has issues. State promises corrective measures after review. New York's domestic violence hotline has significant issues, an audit released by the state comptroller's office on July 1st revealed. The review, which examined the state's Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence, OPDV, from January 2019 through June 2025, was initiated to make sure the agency is providing effective awareness, assistance, response to, and prevention of domestic violence across the state. OPDV's role is to enhance New Yorkers' safety in their intimate and family relationships, and is expected to provide guidance to the governor and the legislature on the best way for the state to respond to domestic violence. The agency's hotline, started in 1981 and operated by a private contractor since October 2021, exists to provide confidential access to domestic violence resources and support for victims, professionals, and concerned individuals. Between 2019 and 2024, the hotline received more than 56,200 calls, the comptroller's office says. The audit's findings, however, show faults in the hotline's response time and translation services inaccuracies. When a victim reaches out to the state's domestic violence hotline, they expect someone to be on the other end to help, State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli said in a written statement on Wednesday. It can be a life or death situation, which is why these lapses are so troubling, DiNapoli continued. the Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence responded positively to the audit and acted on our recommendations, and it should continue shoring up critical programs and services so New Yorkers get the timely help they need. Here's a closer look at the audit's findings. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Audit found significant issues with New York's domestic violence hotline. As part of the audit, the Comptroller's Office made 25 test phone calls, 20 test text messages, and 20 test web-based chat messages to the hotline from December 2024 through June 2025. We found significant issues that limit the hotline's effectiveness in aiding callers, specifically with response time and accuracy of translation services, which are crucial to ensuring that victims of domestic violence receive assistance when they need it, the audit stated. 5 of the 25 calls never connected to a representative. 3 of the 20 texts went unanswered, and 6 of the texts took longer than the 30 seconds required by contract to receive a response. All but one of the test calls also began with a 20-second automated greeting, which the Comptroller's Office says makes it impossible for the contractor to meet the 20-second response time requirement. However, the contract doesn't say it needs to be included in the required response time, but both OPDV and contractor officials say it should be. 12 texts and 8 web-based chats were sent in non-English languages, resulting in translation issues with 5 of the messages. 1 wasn't translated at all, and 4 were mistranslated. And a review of call logs with a 60-day period between the end of December 2024 and the end of April 2025 revealed 6% of the more than 2,800 calls made were not connected. Other issues revealed in audit of New York Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. In addition to the Comptroller's Office's concerns about the domestic violence hotline, the agency outlined a few other OPDV-wide issues. More than 500 additional state entities may fall under the OPDV scope, but don't have gender-based violence policies, the audit asserts, to which OPDV says they disagree with. Additionally, the Comptroller's Office says little has been done to address domestic violence affecting older adults statewide and recommended the agency take steps to develop and promote senior center-based domestic violence prevention programs. OPDV said they will have these programs developed and released by the end of 2026. And limited member participation at OPDV's Domestic Violence Advisory Council meetings are raising red flags. According to the Comptroller's Office, only 4 of 17 members attended all 11 meetings held between 2018 and 2023, and 3 members attended less than half. OPDV said they're working toward changing that, though. In September 2025, OPDV updated its DVAC policies with a new attendance policy and requirement for members to provide their resume, which must reflect expertise in domestic violence as per our statute, OPDV's response to the recommendation in the audit outlines. Has the State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence made any changes? According to the Comptroller's Office, OPDV officials were responsive to the identified issues and began taking action to address them over the course of the audit. The New York State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence takes the findings of the Office of the State Comptroller's audit seriously and appreciates the opportunity to strengthen our work, says OPDV Executive Director Kelly Nichols Owens. Throughout the audit process, OPDV has been developing and implementing corrective actions to address concerns, the statement continued. Our focus is simple. Make sure survivors can access the services and support they need when they need them. The safety and well-being of victims and survivors is at the heart of all we do, Owens added. We remain dedicated to advancing survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive policies and programs, and we will continue to work diligently to uphold the highest standards of public service. In light of the audit's findings, OPDV now requires the contractor to implement strategies to improve response time and language translation services, and is exploring technological upgrades to improve efficiencies and ensure survivors access to timely and reliable assistance. Prior to the audit, the Comptroller's Office says OPDV didn't have written policies and procedures for monitoring its contractors, including the one monitoring the hotline. And while the agency revised their policies in September 2024 to include new monitoring procedures for contract oversight, steps to ensure any problems identified during testing are corrected were not introduced. OPDV also increased their quality assurance reviews of the hotline in October 2024 after they were made aware of the ongoing issues. The agency, however, didn't take steps to identify the causes of the issues or determine whether appropriate corrective actions were taken by the contractor. As a result, these deficiencies may persist, reducing the hotline's usefulness as a critical support service for survivors of domestic and sexual violence, the audit stated. 450,000 in New York lose health insurance. Federal cuts prompt essential plan rollback. Roughly 450,000 low-income New Yorkers lost their health insurance on Wednesday, July 1st, due to a coverage rollback forced by funding cuts enacted last year by Republicans in Washington. The losses came in the state's essential plan, which is funded by the federal government and provides full coverage with no premiums and some copays. Until eligibility was tightened this week, the program covered about 1.7 million working New Yorkers who don't have employer-sponsored plans and whose incomes are just above the cutoff to qualify for Medicaid. New York had expanded enrollment in 2024 by raising the plan's income limit. But faced with steep funding cuts caused by President Donald Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, state leaders opted to undo the essential plan's expansion, ending coverage this week for those earning between 200% and 250% of the federal poverty level. That comes to $32,000 to $40,000 a year for an individual and $66,000 to $80,000 for a family of four. The number of enrollees in that income range reached a peak of 470,000 in January before dropping to 434,000 in recent months as the July 1st deadline approached, according to monthly data posted by the State Department of Health. How many were enrolled when the axe fell this week was unclear. The department hasn't updated its count since May 3rd, and it didn't respond to a question from the USA Today network about how many people lost coverage. A spokeswoman said the department had no data on how many were left uninsured after being removed from the essential plan versus those who had found other coverage at greater expense. The only potential alternatives were employer-sponsored plans or paying for private health insurance through the state-run marketplace. Impact of federal law on New York's essential plan. The lost coverage is part of the fallout from federal policy changes that were projected to cut nearly $1 trillion in healthcare funding over a decade. They were part of the large package of tax and spending cuts passed by Republicans in Congress over united Democratic opposition and signed by Trump 1 year ago. One new policy prohibited using healthcare funding for immigrants, such as asylum seekers who are considered lawfully present in the U.S. and protected from deportation. New York officials said the state stood to lose $7.5 billion in annual funding for the essential plan, far too much for it to replace with state funding. New York initially considered expanding Medicaid with state funds as an alternative, since it's required under a 2001 court ruling to offer coverage to lawfully present residents with qualifying incomes. But state leaders decided instead to shrink essential plan enrollment by restoring the original income cutoff. They said that would help preserve coverage for 1.3 million remaining enrollees. This week's coverage loss rekindled clamor over Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, which promises to be a big campaign issue for the looming November midterm elections. Democrats deplored the impact on essential plan enrollees and other changes that lie ahead, such as new work requirements for Medicaid recipients that will take effect in January. The consequences have been dire, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand said in a statement. Nearly 500,000 New Yorkers now must worry about how they can afford to take their child to the doctor or get their medication. Republicans have defended last year's policy changes as prudent steps to cut wasteful spending and preserve safety net programs for people who most need them. Toll on home care workers enrolled in Essential Plan. Among those who lost their nearly free health insurance, low-paid home care workers. At an online press conference on June 30th, a group advocating for those workers and their elderly and disabled clients warned that thousands of care workers faced that fate. For many, replacing the Essential Plan with insurance through an employer or the state marketplace would be costly and perhaps unaffordable, speakers said. Many will face a significant financial strain from this, said Senator Gustavo Rivera, chairman of the Senate Health Committee, said during the press conference organized by New York Caring Majority. Speakers faulted Governor Kathy Hochul's administration for failing to tap state funds to maintain existing Essential Plan coverage, as Rivera and other lawmakers sought in this year's budget talks. Emily Eisner, executive director of the Fiscal Policy Institute, said doing so would have averted the largest decrease in enrollment in state history, one that could raise New York's uninsured rate above 10%. Another speaker said she was about to lose Essential Plan coverage that had made a ginormous impact on her life since she became eligible. It had finally enabled her in her 40s to visit doctors to address health issues she had previously neglected. I live paycheck to paycheck, like many New Yorkers, so paying a $55 copay at a specialist is manageable, said 48-year-old Kelly Foster, who works for a Watertown-based advocacy group for people with disabilities. The unaffordable, high-deductible marketplace plans are not. Smart Asset Study defines middle class in New York. Would you be considered middle class in New York? As prices and the cost of living continue to rise, it can be hard to distinguish what it actually means to be middle class and whether it's still attainable in 2026. The expectation of being middle class is often deemed by home ownership, raising kids, having emergency funds, having retirement savings, and being able to splurge on the occasional vacation. Pew Research defines the middle class in practice as making 2/3 to 2 times the median income. However, meeting the mark of being middle class varies by state and its local job market, housing affordability, and infrastructure, among other factors. Smart Asset published a study to determine what it means to be middle class in each state by ranking all of the states and the 100 largest cities in the United States based on the upper bound of middle class income using data from the 2024 U.S. Census and Pew Research Center studies. New York middle class incomes. The median middle class household income in New York is $85,820. Which ranked the number 15 spot out of the highest median incomes across the country, according to Smart Asset. To be considered middle class in New York, the Smart Asset study states that you would have to make at least $57,213. Any household income above $171,640 would be considered upper class, according to the study. New York's neighboring states, Massachusetts and New Jersey, have the 2 highest median incomes across the country, with Massachusetts' median being $104,828 and New Jersey's being $104,294. $35,000 in Buffalo equals middle class. The Smart Asset study found that Buffalo, New York, is among the 10 cities with the lowest bound on middle-class income, where you would have to make just shy of $35,000 to be considered middle class. Buffalo ranked number 98 out of 100 cities, meaning it has the third lowest income needed to be middle class, with its median household income for the middle class falling at $52,211. To be considered middle class in Buffalo, you would need to make at least $34,807. Anything above $104,422 would be considered upper class, according to the study. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The median household income in New York City, however, is $81,228. To be considered middle class in New York City, you would need to make at least $54,152. Anything above $162,456 would be considered upper class. How middle class was assessed. To determine what the income requirements and limits are to being middle class in different locations, Smart Asset analyzed the U.S. Census Bureau's 2024 one-year American Community Survey data for the median household income in all 50 states and among the 100 largest U.S. cities. Smart Asset stated that it then used the Pew Research definition of middle-class households, which indicates the salary range from 2/3 to double the median U.S. salary, to help determine the middle-class income range. Out-of-work fishermen saved American Revolution. British Act backfired, created what many consider America's first Navy. George Washington knew his forces could not win the American Revolutionary War without some measure of sea power. It follows then, as certain as that night succeeds the day, he later wrote in a letter, that without a decisive naval force we can do nothing definitive, and with it everything honorable and glorious. The problem was that the American commander did not have a navy. As a professor of early American history, I have taught courses on the American Revolution for more than 20 years and have written 2 books on its maritime dimensions. Washington's solution wouldn't come from a French shipyard or a congressional committee. It would come from a group of angry, out-of-work New England fishermen, supplying the army from the sea. In 1775, American ground forces managed to lay siege to the British Army in Boston, but Washington needed provisions and military stores to sustain pressure on this key commercial hub. Looking out across the Atlantic Ocean, he noticed supply ships arriving in droves from Great Britain, unescorted to supply the British Army in Boston with guns and ammunition. Unbeknownst to them, the British had already handed the American commander the ships and mariners he needed to capture those resources. The Sons of Liberty, a network of political activists, had angered the British government by resisting taxes and commercial regulations, from the 1765 Stamp Act, which taxed printed documents, to the 1773 Tea Act, which controlled what tea leaves made their way into North American cupboards. To punish rebels for their treason, Parliament passed the Restraining Act of 1775, banning New Englanders from fishing on the Atlantic Ocean. Overnight, thousands of skilled mariners, men who spent their lives wrestling 100-pound cod out of the freezing, storm-tossed North Atlantic, were out of a job. They weren't just unemployed, they were furious. These fishermen left their work tools and ships behind, picked up weapons, and joined the siege of Boston alongside American farmers. Ashley Bowen, who lived and worked in Marblehead, Massachusetts, the principal fishing port in America at the time, recorded in his journal on May 22, 1775, "The fishermen are enlisting quite quick." A letter from a French diplomat to the foreign minister in Paris confirmed the news a couple of weeks later. 4,800 sailors, seeing they were going to be deprived of their fishing rights, deserted their ships and joined their compatriots under arms. Creating the First Navy. Washington, commissioned by Congress as Commander-in-Chief of all American Armed Forces in June 1775, saw an opportunity. He didn't wait for Congress to build new frigates. Instead, he reached out to John Glover, a fish merchant from Marblehead and a commissioned officer under his command. Washington's plan was simple: take the sturdy, salt-stained schooners used for fishing and turn them into armed, seagoing predators. The first of these was Glover's own fishing vessel and trade ship, Hannah. She wasn't a formidable man-of-war, but a 78-ton workhorse that spent summers at the Grand Banks and winters hauling rum and sugar from the Caribbean. Washington armed the trade ship with a few cannons, manned her with fishermen, and sent her out to hijack British supply ships to help his army with the siege of Boston. Just 2 days after the Hannah was underway, her crew captured the Unity, a sloop loaded with naval stores and lumber, supplies sorely needed by British forces in Boston. Between August and October 1775, Washington outfitted a fleet of schooners at Congress's expense to intercept British supply ships off the coast of New England. These vessels and crews, whose wages were paid by the American government, constituted what many historians consider America's first navy. Washington reminded each captain that they sailed at the continental expense. These orders from Washington and the payments made by Congress made these ships official American warships, operating under the authority of what would become the federal government. These recruits didn't need nautical training. They were seasoned seafarers who had battled rough waters and gale-force winds. On October 13, 1775, George Washington wrote to his brother John Augustine Washington that the fishermen were soldiers who have been bred to the sea. In 1776, Washington informed the governor of Connecticut, who had asked to draft seamen from Washington's regiments for his own naval expedition, that he could not spare any. "I must depend chiefly upon them for a successful opposition to the enemy," Washington explained. Keeping the Revolution alive. This fleet of converted fishing boats punched above its weight. In the early years of the war, they captured 55 British vessels. One such prize, the Nancy, was transporting 2,000 muskets, 30 tons of musket balls, and a massive 15-inch brass mortar, supplies the American Army desperately needed for the war effort. Because the British Navy was spread too thin, with too few warships available to police the Atlantic coastline, the armed fishing vessels were able to disrupt supply lines and keep the Revolution alive through its infancy. By the time the British realized the threat, the damage was done. On February 26, 1776, just a few months after Washington launched his fleet, British Admiral Molyneux Schuldhem wrote in a report to his superiors that his forces in Boston were low on everything, from naval supplies to weapons. What little they could find had to be purchased at the most extravagant prices. The British government had not assigned military convoys to transatlantic shipments at the start of the conflict in 1775. Now, Schuldhem recommended arming the supply ships themselves, since valuable stores were being intercepted by rebels in small vessels. However attentive are officers to their duty. He concluded the report with an ominous note, explaining that he simply did not have the resources to do everything that was being asked of him: support the army, blockade rebel ports, and protect British ships bound for Boston. "I must beg leave to observe to you the very few ships I am provided with to enable me to cooperate with the army, cruise off the ports of the rebels to prevent their receiving supplies, or protect those destined to this place from falling into their hands." Popular Pittsford Cafe moving to new location. Route 31 Cafe and Eatery is relocating within Pittsford Plaza, moving to a larger space that will include expanded dining and menu options. The cafe announced that its new location will be built behind Citizens Bank, about 400 yards from its current storefront at 3349 Monroe Ave, between Sheer Ego Salon and Spa and Elite Tailor Inc. Current cafe will remain open during construction. Route 31 said it will continue operating from its current location while construction on the new space is underway. The cafe plans to open the new location once construction is complete. An opening date has not yet been announced. Larger space, expanded menu planned. The new restaurant will feature full-service dining, a bar, and an enclosed patio. Route 31 also plans to expand its menu with additional breakfast, lunch, dinner, and drink offerings. The new location will also provide more accessible parking for customers. A Pittsford Plaza fixture since 2015. Route 31 has been part of Pittsford Plaza since 2015. The cafe is known for using locally sourced ingredients in a menu that includes salads, sandwiches, and pizzas. The business said it will share construction updates and announce its opening date on its Facebook and Instagram pages. Mount Rushmore facing growing repair backlog. As the nation celebrates 250 years, a century-old monument in the Black Hills of South Dakota is in dire need of maintenance. Mount Rushmore, which features 60-foot-tall faces of Presidents George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt, carved into the granite mountain, has $57 million in deferred maintenance needs, according to the National Park Service. At the end of fiscal year 2025, the Park Service had a backlog of deferred maintenance projects totaling more than $24.2 billion for monuments and parks around the country. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's administration is redirecting tens of millions of dollars from fees paid to Park Service to fund President Trump's vanity projects in Washington, say House and Senate Democrats, citing reports and information revealed to Congress. Trump has undertaken various projects in Washington, including repair of water fountains in Lafayette Square, the White House's East Wing Ballroom, and the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool. Many of these projects have drawn criticism for a variety of reasons, including not seeking congressional approval and awarding no-bid contracts. An analysis of federal contract data by USA Today found that 20 days before Trump first announced the renovation of the reflecting pool, the government had already committed $8.5 million to fix the pool, even though the president said it would cost $2 million. Under the Federal Lands Recreation Enhancement Act of 2004, at least 80% of the entrance fees paid on site must be retained and used at the national park where the fees are collected. The remaining 20% can be used to improve parks that don't change entrance fees. Democrats also assert that the revenue from the sale of digital America the Beautiful passes appears to be funding some of these projects without any guardrails or transparency. Unlike fees collected on site, the 2004 law does not mandate a particular formula for the use of the digitally collected revenue. Credible sources with direct knowledge of these matters have now reported to Congress that much, if not all, fee revenue from online America the Beautiful passes is being used to fund the president's beautification projects in Washington, says a June 23rd letter from Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, and colleagues to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. The letter asks a series of questions, including about what percentage of revenue from online sales are being used for these projects and how much of the Park Service's recreation fee account has been used for projects in Washington since January 2025, when Trump reclaimed the White House. The Department of the Interior said it has many funding sources available to spend on deferred maintenance. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. ABC's David Muir makes rare climb for America's 250th. David Muir has gone where very few people have gone before, the very top of the Statue of Liberty. For ABC's coverage of America's 250th birthday, the World News Tonight anchor, 52, took a cameraman along as he climbed to the top of Lady Liberty's torch, a very high and exclusive perch on the statue that reaches over 300 feet high. The torch has been closed since 1916. During an exclusive phone interview with USA Today, alongside ABC colleagues Diane Sawyer and Deborah Roberts, Muir spoke of the climb with the final stretch up a narrow 40-foot ladder to the torch, and the question he posed to the park ranger who was guiding him. "How many people are allowed up here?" Muir recalled asking, to which the park ranger replied, "Nobody." Climbing the ladder itself was more terrifying than standing up on the platform, Muir said, noting he had an immediate response when his cameraman asked if he wanted to go up a second time to film it from a different angle. "You just hear the audio of me saying, 'I'm not going back down. We're not doing this twice.'" When asked if Muir needed a break during his 300-foot climb, Sawyer, 80, interrupted. "Have you met David Muir?" she quipped, eliciting laughter from Muir and Roberts, 65. "Do you think he needed a break?" Heights and physical challenges aside, Muir said the moment was a poignant one. "Once you're up there, you are just in complete awe of the beauty of New York Harbor," he said, "and you immediately think of the people who came into the harbor on those ships and thought, 'I'm getting a chance at a new life.'" ABC marks America's 250th birthday with 24-hour programming. As the nation prepares to celebrate its birthday, Muir, Roberts, and Sawyer, and many of their Disney colleagues set out to showcase the stories that have shaped the country. The company is celebrating the moment with a full day of programming in conjunction with ABC, ABC News, ESPN, and National Geographic. Muir will lead the coverage, which includes everything from the aforementioned feature at the Statue of Liberty on July 3rd, also with Roberts and musical guest Brandi Carlile, to the annual July 4th Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest on Coney Island. Muir, Roberts, and Sawyer will also join other ABC colleagues in Wonders of America, July 4th, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, providing a look at the country's natural wonders and how they've shaped history. For the special, Muir went to the Grand Canyon and Redwoods National and State Park, while Roberts covered Yellowstone National Park and Sawyer traveled to the Appalachian Mountains. Roberts, who co-anchors the long-running program 2020 with Muir, called her time in Yellowstone a magical experience, though the shoot came with its own set of challenges, including rain and unexpected delays. "We have to stop and break for bison as we're going along," she said, "but that's what that raw beauty was in this place. It's hard to believe it was an assignment." People didn't really believe that this thing existed in the very beginning because of how wondrous it is, Roberts said. "For me, it was just awe-inspiring." As for Sawyer, the longtime anchor, who still contributes to ABC News after handing over the World News Tonight reins to Muir in 2014, found the Appalachian Mountains provided an endless state of surprise. The range, which covers 13 U.S. states and stretches into Canada, has been dubbed a biodiversity highway due to the animals, plants, cuisine, and preservation of original bluegrass and folk songs native to the region. "It was an interesting tapestry of America and how it formed us and formed our idea of who we are in a way," Sawyer said, noting how settlers likely said, "If we make it across these mountains, then nothing stops us all the way to the Pacific." "I think one of the great joys of this job is when you can bring people something that doesn't need words," she said. The always-on journalist goes off the grid. While Muir is filled with gratitude that he and his colleagues were able to tell these stories from different parts of the country, he also joked about an added benefit from some of their travels. "First of all, our phones did not work, which was the real gift," he said of his time in Redwoods. "But there was this moment when we were looking up at this tree in front of us and trying to assess how old it was. We realized that all of the trees around us are much older than the Declaration of Independence, much older than this country." The steward of Save the Redwoods, an organization that protects and restores the forest, was standing there with me, and he said, "And you know what? They'll be here hundreds of years after us." Founding Fathers envisioned how to hold power to account. Other coverage on the 4th of July will include GMA's 50 States in 50 Weeks, July 4th, 1:07 a.m. Eastern Time, and Nashville's Star-Spangled Bash, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, hosted by Ryan Seacrest. Muir will also helm Dawn in America, 5 a.m. Eastern Time, which traces American history through documents like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The First Amendment and freedom of the press have long been central to American democracy, but debates over media independence have intensified during the Trump administration, especially as changes at CBS News and 60 Minutes made headlines. As part of his reporting, Muir saw the original first drafts of the Declaration of Independence and Constitution in Philadelphia. He noticed freedom of the press written in the margin of the Constitution, which of course eventually became part of the Bill of Rights, ratified in 1791. It was on the Founding Fathers' minds when they were envisioning the future of this country, he said. To see it in the margin that they thought that one of those ways to hold power to account over our 250 years would be freedom of the press, to ask the questions and to be brave. They knew that from the very start. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Monday, July 6th issue of the Democrat and Chronicle. Your reader has been Jackie Cohen. Thank you for listening.